The sea has never needed a voice to inspire fear. Its power speaks in crashing waves, in horizons that swallow ships whole, in depths that refuse to give up their secrets. Long before sailors mapped the oceans or kings ruled from marble halls, the ancient Greeks believed this restless force had a mind and a god behind it. His name was Poseidon, and from the very beginning, his presence carried a warning: respect the waters or be erased by them. Before we dive in, give that like button a little tap, and if you want to stick around for more late-night journeys like this, hit subscribe. While you're getting comfy, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your world. I love seeing the mix of places that come along for the ride. Now, dim the lights, maybe grab a blanket, and let's drift into today's story together. The story of Poseidon begins in chaos. Before the Olympians ruled, the universe groaned under the weight of the Titans, ancient beings of raw force and unshaped power. Among them was Cronus, ruler of all, who feared his own children would one day overthrow him. That fear proved justified. Led by Zeus, the Olympian siblings rose in rebellion, unleashing a war that shook reality itself. Mountains were torn apart, seas boiled, the sky burned. When the Titans finally fell, the world stood silent, scarred, and waiting to be claimed. Victory did not bring peace, it brought division. The cosmos had to be ruled, and power had to be claimed. Lots were cast among the three brothers. Zeus took the sky, crowning himself king of the gods. Hades received the shadowed realm beneath the earth, and Poseidon, neither first nor last, was given the sea. But this was no lesser prize. The oceans covered most of the known world. They fed cities, destroyed fleets, and isolated entire civilizations. From the moment he accepted his domain, Poseidon ruled more territory than any god alive. The sea did not submit quietly. It surged and resisted, mirroring the temperament of its new master. Poseidon bent the waters to his will, commanding tides, currents, and storms. But his power did not stop at the shoreline. The Greeks believed the earth itself trembled at his command. Earthquakes were called the strikes of the earth-shaker, proof that Poseidon's reach extended beneath the land as well as above it. Where Zeus ruled from the sky, distant and watchful, Poseidon's power was immediate and impossible to escape. To rule such a domain required a symbol, a weapon worthy of chaos itself. From the depths of divine forges came the trident, a three-pronged spear that embodied the sea's fury. With a single strike, Poseidon could split cliffs, summon storms, or shatter the seabed. The trident was not merely a tool of rule, it was a reminder. Every crashing wave, every sudden squall, every ship broken against unseen rocks carried the echo of its power. Even among the gods, Poseidon was known for his temper. He was not patient like Hades, nor strategic like Zeus. His emotions moved like the tides, calm one moment, catastrophic the next. Insults were never forgotten. Challenges were met with overwhelming force. When crossed, he did not argue, he destroyed. These early signs spread quickly across Olympus. Gods learned to tread carefully. Mortals would learn the same lesson, often too late. For humans, Poseidon was not a distant myth. He was present in every voyage, every fishing net cast into dark waters, every prayer whispered before setting sail. A calm sea meant favor. A sudden storm meant judgment, or indifference, which was often worse. Entire fleets vanished without explanation. Coastal cities crumbled after the ground split beneath them. To the ancient world, these were not natural events, they were messages, and the message was always clear. The sea obeyed no one but Poseidon. From the ashes of the Titan's fall, Poseidon emerged not as a background god, but as a force woven into daily survival. His realm fed humanity, connected civilizations, and just as easily erased them. While Zeus ruled from above, distant behind thunderclouds, Poseidon ruled where humans lived, traveled, and died. And from the very beginning, fear followed him like a shadow across the waves.
The sea can be calm for days, even weeks, lulling sailors into trust. Then, without warning, it turns. Waves rise like walls, winds scream, the horizon disappears. To the ancient Greeks, this was not chance, it was temperament. And no god embodied that dangerous unpredictability more than Poseidon, whose anger moved as fast and as violently as the tides themselves. Poseidon was a god who demanded recognition. His pride was vast, matching the oceans he ruled. Unlike Zeus, whose authority was secured through law and hierarchy, Poseidon's authority was personal. It had to be felt, it had to be acknowledged. A forgotten offering, a careless word, or a perceived slight could ignite his anger. Myths describe him as easily provoked, not because he lacked control, but because he believed his power justified his reactions. Respect was not optional, it was survival. When Poseidon punished, he did not whisper warnings, he announced his displeasure through the sky and sea. Storms gathered suddenly, churning waters into chaos. Rain fell in sheets. Waves crushed harbors and swallowed ships whole. Floods erased fields, homes, and entire communities. These were not random disasters to the ancient mind. They were consequences. Each storm carried a message. The sea god had been offended, and the cost of that offense would be paid in wreckage. Poseidon's anger did not stop at the water's edge. The Greeks believed he controlled the stability of the land itself. When the ground split or cities crumbled, they said the earthshaker had struck. Earthquakes were seen as physical proof of divine fury, moments when Poseidon reminded mortals that even solid ground was borrowed. Temples collapsed, walls cracked, entire regions were reshaped. In these moments, the sea god's power felt absolute. There was nowhere to flee when both land and sea turned hostile. Poseidon's temper was not reserved for mortals alone. Even the gods felt its force. He clashed repeatedly with fellow Olympians, especially when his authority was questioned. Disputes over cities, influence, and honor often escalated into bitter rivalries. Poseidon did not forget insults, and he did not forgive easily. When challenged, he responded not with compromise, but with escalation. These divine conflicts spilled into the mortal world, turning humans into collateral damage in arguments far beyond their control. For humans, the most terrifying aspect of Poseidon's nature was not cruelty, but indifference. Mortals often suffered not because they had done wrong, but because they were nearby. A king's broken oath, a city's forgotten tribute, or another god's insult could doom innocent sailors and fishermen. Ships were shattered, voyages delayed or erased. Families waited on shores that never saw their loved ones return. To live near the sea was to accept that one god's anger could reach you without warning or reason. Over time, the sea itself became Poseidon's most effective weapon. It required no constant action, only the threat of action. Every creaking hull, every shifting tide, every distant storm cloud reminded mortals of who truly ruled their fate. Fear became a form of worship. Sailors prayed not for victory, but for safe passage. Cities built temples near harbors, hoping devotion might soften the god's mood. The sea did not need to strike often. Its reputation was enough.
The Greeks understood something deeply unsettling about Poseidon. His anger was not guided by justice alone. It was emotional, personal, and unpredictable. Where Zeus punished according to laws he himself enforced, Poseidon punished according to how he felt in the moment. This made him far more dangerous. You could obey rules and still suffer. You could be innocent and still drown. This unpredictability shaped how ancient people viewed the world. The sea was not evil, but it was never safe. It demanded humility, it demanded constant appeasement, and above all, it demanded acceptance that control was an illusion. In Poseidon, the Greeks saw the raw truth of nature, power without empathy, strength without explanation. By understanding Poseidon's violent nature, we begin to see why fear followed his name across generations. He was not just a god of storms and waves, he was the embodiment of chaos that could not be reasoned with. And for those who lived by the sea, that chaos was always close, always watching, always waiting for the tide to turn.
Power shared is power contested. On Mount Olympus, where immortals ruled the universe, authority was never as stable as it appeared. Beneath the thrones and lightning, resentment simmered, and among all the gods, no rivalry burned as fiercely or as dangerously as the one between Poseidon and his fellow Olympians. Though Zeus was crowned king of the gods, his rule did not erase his brother's ambitions. Poseidon accepted the sea as his domain, but he never accepted being second. The oceans covered most of the world, touching every shore, feeding every empire. In Poseidon's eyes, this made his power equal, if not superior, to the sky. While Zeus governed from above with thunder and decree, Poseidon governed directly, shaping the daily lives of mortals. This imbalance bred tension. Respect between the brothers existed, but it was strained, fragile, and often tested. One of the most famous divine rivalries erupted over a single city. Athens stood as a prize worth claiming, and Poseidon believed it belonged to him. He struck the ground with his trident, calling forth a powerful spring, but the water was salt, undrinkable, a reminder of the sea's harsh nature. Athena, calm and deliberate, offered an olive tree, symbol of peace, wisdom, and survival. The people chose her gift. To Poseidon, the loss was more than political. It was a public rejection of his authority. The bitterness from that moment echoed through myths for generations. Olympus was no unified family. Alliances shifted as easily as the tides. Poseidon aligned himself with other gods when it suited him, especially those who felt overshadowed by Zeus's rule. Trust was temporary, loyalty was conditional. These shifting bonds fueled constant tension among the immortals. Poseidon was neither isolated nor universally supported. He was respected, feared, and carefully managed. Other gods understood that siding against him carried risks, but so did standing too close when his anger flared. At the height of his resentment, Poseidon went further than rivalry. He participated in open rebellion. In one myth, he joined a failed rebellion against Zeus, conspiring with other gods to restrain the king of Olympus. The attempt failed, but the act itself revealed how deep the fractures ran. Poseidon was willing to challenge divine order when he felt it unjust. This was not the behavior of a subordinate. It was the mark of a god who believed power should not be centralized, even if chaos followed. Zeus did not ignore rebellion. When Poseidon crossed the line, punishment followed. In one telling, Poseidon was forced to serve a mortal king, building walls for the city of Troy. For a god who commanded storms and continents, this was humiliation. But even in submission, Poseidon's resentment grew. He obeyed, but he remembered. And when the opportunity for vengeance arose, it came with devastating consequences for those who broke their oaths or underestimated his memory. Unlike Zeus, who often moved on after conflict,
Poseidon held grudges like anchors. His anger did not fade with time, it waited. Cities suffered generations later for old offenses. Heroes faced trials not because of their own actions, but because of their lineage or alliances. These grudges reshaped entire myth cycles, turning simple journeys into endless struggles. The sea god's memory was long, and his patience was thin. Through these feuds, Poseidon revealed something unsettling about Olympus itself. The gods were not symbols of perfect order. They were reflections of power, ego, and rivalry. Poseidon's conflicts exposed the cracks beneath divine rule, showing that even immortals feared being diminished. For mortals, these feuds were disastrous waiting to happen. When gods argued, humans paid the price. Storms destroyed trade routes, cities fell from favor, heroes were tested beyond reason. Poseidon's place in these conflicts made him especially dangerous, not because he always acted unjustly, but because his sense of justice was personal. In the balance of Olympus, Poseidon was the god who refused to be quiet. He challenged authority, contested ownership, and never fully accepted limits placed upon him. This defiance made him unpredictable even among gods, and in a world where divine disputes shaped reality, unpredictability was the greatest threat of all.
The deepest fears are not born on land. They rise from dark water, from places the sun cannot reach, from shapes that move beneath the surface and never fully reveal themselves. For the ancient Greeks, these fears had an author. Poseidon did not rule the sea alone. He filled it with terror, curses, and living reminders of his anger. The sea was not empty under Poseidon's rule. It was alive with creatures shaped by divine will. Some were guardians, others were punishments given form. Enormous serpents, bulls born from waves, beasts with endless hunger, all were said to answer to the sea god. These monsters were not accidents of nature. They were expressions of Poseidon's power, unleashed when storms and earthquakes were not enough. To encounter one was to face the god's attention directly. One of Poseidon's most famous curses began with a broken promise. King Minos of Crete prayed to the sea god for a sign of divine approval. Poseidon answered by sending a magnificent bull from the waves, meant to be sacrificed in his honor. But Minos kept the bull, admiring its beauty and defying his oath. The punishment was not immediate, but it was precise. Poseidon twisted desire itself, leading to the birth of the Minotaur, a creature trapped between human and beast. The monster was not just a curse on a king, but a warning. Promises to the sea god were not symbolic, they were binding. Even cities were not beyond Poseidon's reach. Before the Trojan War, Poseidon and Apollo once helped build the mighty walls of Troy, sworn payment promised by its king. When the reward never came, Poseidon did not forget. Years later, Troy stood strong against invaders, but it stood on borrowed time. During the war, Poseidon's loyalty shifted with his anger, aiding destruction when oaths were broken again. The fall of Troy was not only the result of strategy and heroes, it was the slow return of divine resentment. When Poseidon chose to punish on a grand scale, the sea itself became the weapon. Coastal lands vanished beneath surging tides. Rivers overflowed as oceans pushed inland. These floods were not temporary setbacks, they erased histories. Fields became seabeds, cities were reduced to memory. Unlike fire or war, water left little behind. To be drowned by Poseidon's wrath was to be wiped from the world quietly, without glory or explanation. Even heroes, favored by the gods, were not safe. Some earned Poseidon's anger through pride, others were simply unlucky. Voyages meant to bring glory turned into endless trials when the sea god intervened. Ships were scattered, crews were lost, paths home stretched into years of suffering. Facing Poseidon was not about strength, it was about endurance. Heroes learned that courage mattered little when the sea itself rejected you. Over time, the ocean became more than a setting for myths. It became a character. It whispered danger even on calm days. Every unknown depth suggested monsters waiting below. Every distant wave hinted at sudden ruin. Sailors believed they traveled across a living domain, one that could turn against them without warning. This belief shaped rituals, prayers, and entire cultures. The sea demanded respect because it carried memory, and Poseidon never forgot. What makes Poseidon's monsters and catastrophes so haunting is their purpose. They were not random horrors. Each one was tied to a choice, a broken vow, or an insult ignored too long. The punishment always fit the offense, but it rarely stopped with the offender. Families, cities, and future generations suffered alongside the guilty. In this way, Poseidon's justice felt vast and impersonal, like the sea itself. These stories taught a harsh lesson. Power does not need to explain itself. It does not need to be fair to be feared. Poseidon ruled through consequence, not mercy. His monsters guarded boundaries humans were never meant to cross. His curses reminded kings that authority meant nothing before divine will. His floods erased the illusion of permanence. By filling the sea with terror, Poseidon ensured obedience without constant action. Mortals feared what might be waiting beneath the waves more than what they could see. That fear kept his name alive in whispered prayers and desperate offerings. The ocean became a living reminder that some forces are meant to be endured, not conquered.
If the gods were judged by how closely they touched human lives, one name would always rise above the rest. Not from the sky, not from a distant throne, but from the shoreline, where survival depended on moods no one could predict. To the ancient world, Poseidon was not an abstract force. He was present every day, in every wave that fed them or took everything away. For ancient civilizations, the sea was life itself. Trade routes, food supplies, travel, and communication all depended on open water. Cities rose where harbors thrived. Entire economies rested on safe passage across unpredictable ways. While Zeus ruled the sky, most people rarely felt his presence in their daily labor. Poseidon, however, shaped every decision: when to sail, when to fish, when to stay home and wait. A calm sea meant prosperity. A violent one meant famine or ruin. Dependence breeds fear, especially when mercy is uncertain. Before ships ever left shore, rituals began. Offerings were cast into the water, animals were sacrificed, prayers were whispered with urgency rather than confidence. Sailors did not ask Poseidon for victory, they begged for survival. Even experienced crews feared angering the sea god through carelessness or pride. A single mistake could invite disaster. These rituals were not symbolic traditions, they were desperate negotiations with a god who controlled whether anyone returned home. What terrified mortals most was not Poseidon's strength, it was his inconsistency. His justice followed no visible pattern. Two identical offerings might bring calm one day and storms the next. A respectful city could still suffer, while a careless one escaped harm. Unlike Zeus, whose punishments often followed clear rules or laws, Poseidon acted on emotion. His responses were shaped by memory, mood, and personal grievance. This made obedience uncertain. Fear thrives when outcomes cannot be predicted. The Greeks revered Zeus as a king. They feared Poseidon as a force. Temples to Zeus stood proudly in city centers, symbols of order and justice. Shrines to Poseidon often stood near the sea, places of appeasement rather than celebration. Worshippers did not seek closeness with the sea god, they sought distance from his anger. Their devotion was cautious, practical, and rooted in survival rather than admiration. Zeus ruled through structure. Laws, oaths, and hierarchy shaped his authority. When he punished, it usually followed clear defiance. Poseidon ruled through chaos. His power had no fixed boundaries. Storms ignored borders. Floods erased distinctions between guilty and innocent. Where Zeus represented civilization's order, Poseidon represented nature's indifference. Mortals could understand laws, they could not understand the sea, and what cannot be understood is always feared more deeply. Long after temples crumbled and myths faded, the fear of the sea remained. Sailors still respect storms. Coastal communities still brace for tides that cannot be controlled. In this way, Poseidon's legacy never truly vanished. He became a symbol of forces beyond human command, a reminder that power does not always answer to reason or fairness. The fear once tied to his name survived because the sea itself never changed. The ancient Greeks did not fear Poseidon because he was cruel. They feared him because he was honest. The sea promised nothing. It gave without warning and took without apology. Poseidon embodied that truth. While Zeus represented authority humans hoped to understand, Poseidon represented reality they had to accept. To live under Poseidon's gaze was to live with humility. Every voyage was a gamble. Every calm horizon could become a threat. And in that constant uncertainty, fear became wisdom. Not fear that paralyzed, but fear that taught respect. As this journey through Poseidon's wrath comes to an end, remember that these myths survived because they spoke to real experience. They explained why humans feel small before the ocean, why they still pause before crossing it, why they sense something ancient in its roar. If you enjoy exploring these stories and want to continue uncovering the gods, monsters, and forgotten fears that shaped ancient belief, consider joining this channel so you don't miss the next descent into myth and legend.